Hello and welcome to Accolade. In this video session, we walk you through the creation of a REST API using Accolade's schema-centric and visual approach to creating a specification and generate either a Swagger or an OpenAPI documentation file. Accolade's approach leaves the complex syntax and metadata to the side so designers can focus on what matters most, the structure of the contract being exchanged between producers and consumers. The tool generates a syntactically valid Swagger 2 or OpenAPI 3 file in either JSON or YAML, which can be copied and pasted and inserted back into your regular API creation process. The tool can also reverse engineer existing Swagger or OpenAPI files to create a visual schema-centric view of your requests and responses. The tool can also reverse engineer existing Swagger or OpenAPI files to create a visual schema-centric view of your requests and responses. Accolade completely adheres to the best practice of the design first or model first approach, whereby requirements are gathered and the contract is modeled prior to writing a single line of code. An API model in Accolade is a great communication tool between the different application stakeholders. But let's start with a blank page. To create a new API model, you first need to choose your target. We'll do the demo using the more recent OpenAPI specification, but you could use Swagger as well. An OpenAPI specification is made of metadata, servers and authentication, then paths that include parameters, a request body, and one or more responses. Let's quickly copy and paste the metadata and servers info. As you can see, we don't need to know the precise syntax. We just fill in the information and we trust that the application will produce syntactically correct JSON or YAML according to the specification. Now we can concentrate on the transactions, the requests and responses, and their corresponding structures, the schema. Let's take an example of this transaction, pet by pet ID. And when we look at the structure of the get resources, some parameters need to be defined for the requests. There are 3 responses, 200 with the schema of a pet, and 2 possible errors, 400 invalid ID supplied, and 404 pet not found. Let's create this contract in Accolade. First, but it's not a must, let's create a reusable schema component for a pet. It's not an obligation to start with this definition, but it's a good practice. To save time for this video, I've already created the different schema components. Let's take a look at them. We see the pet schema component. When we open it, we can see that it itself makes a reference to other schema components. Category, which is already defined here, and tag, which is already defined over here. Now that these components have been created, they can be reused as much as you want in the API model. And if the schema needs to evolve, you make the change in the central place so it is immediately propagated to all of the instances in the API, making reference to the schema component definition. The application shows all the possible ways that info can be entered. Back on the ERD, we find that the unused possibilities take too much space. So we have a toolbar button to toggle them off and show only the relevant parts of the structure. We then create a first response, 200, and its metadata. To edit its content, the easiest is to go in the tree view by double-clicking on the response top bar. A standard application/JSON media content is automatically created. Let's insert one for application/XML. For the schema, this is where the earlier investment is going to really pay off. We can add an attribute from a reference component by right-clicking, Add Attribute, Reference, Component, and choose Pet. Let's do the same for the media content type application/JSON. Note, however, that references don't necessarily have to be declared in component schema. You may also use external references, such as models on Swagger Hub, JSON schema files, or even another schema component in a Accolade model. Let's quickly add the two error responses. Note the different possible layouts being offered. There's this standard pyramid. You may also stack the responses, or stack only the empty responses, or display horizontal manner. It's time to see the results of our work. The OpenAPI specification gets generated and validated. Output can be in JSON or YAML, and you may simulate the API with the interactive pane on the right. Finally, you may copy the generated specification, then paste it into the Swagger editor, or generate a file through forward engineering. Here's a tip: when your API becomes fairly large, you may adjust the sequence of the objects in your object browser by using the up and down arrow keys in the toolbar. Note also that you may create schema definitions or components from JSON documents, from JSON schemas, TDLs, or logical models in XSD format. We conclude here this video session, which we hope you have found useful. Please consult our website accolade.com for additional information and download a 14-day free trial of the software.